Nice, easy little chip there, and today I'm going to give you 3 things that I want to talk about in chipping that are going to help you hit chips just like that one. Let's take a look at thing number 1. So the first thing is the concept of chipping. When I see a lot of poor chippers, one of the big common faults is always that when I hit that chip then, we saw it go up in the air. It went, you know, sort of high as the flag, maybe 7 or 8 feet on a shot that is only about 18 yards. So when we think of chipping or pitching, we think of height. We're not thinking of distance because I'm not trying to hit it 300 yards. I'm thinking about getting the ball up in the air quickly and getting it to stop quickly, maybe even having that a little bit of that nice little juicy backspin on it. So when we get that concept in our head, one of the big problems that I see is that if we just wander around here, is what happens during the golf swing. Because in my mind, the concept of a chip is all about height, we start to see that everything is geared in our brain to try and get it up in the air. So we would see a leaning back from the target, which is not what we want. We would see through impact, I try and lean back even more. And then as we go through the club face, I almost try and help it up into the sky. Now, if you're someone who's struggling with your chipping, I would imagine you duff it and you thin it a lot. That one that when you stood here only 5 or 6 paces off the green goes whizzing through, and if it hits someone's ankles, it would probably snap them. Not the shot we want. If we think about that concept, if I were to put this on the golf club now and we come in close just next to this golf ball here, look how much loft that has. Look how high that pointer is pointing. So if my club were coming in level here and gathered that ball up, look where the pointer is. It's straight up in the sky. It's going to go up there. So I don't need to do anything to help that ball get up. I actually want to do the opposite. I want to make sure that I get a good strike and actually get almost a pretty neutral to slightly downwards angle of attack to get it up in the air. So the first concept that we've got to understand that when we're chipping to be a better chipper is that as I come and I get the shot that wants to go high, I've got to let the loft do the job. You don't need to do it. You've selected the club. There's a reason why you've pulled that sand wedge, lob wedge, pitching wedge, whatever it may be. The reason is because there's loft on it that's going to help us get it up in the air. So as I then come to play it, let's try and gear ourselves to actually feeling that we're actually almost going to hit ever so slightly down on it. So my weight would be a little bit more forwards as I go into it. As I come through, I'm trying to hit down a little bit more and brush the turf. I'm not trying to go back and lift the ball up off the turf. Let the loft do the job, and what we should start to see is something a bit like that, where it pops out and runs out towards the flag with a nice little bit of height on it. Let's take a look at the second thing that I want you to get right in your mind as you're going to go and hit some chip shots. So the second thing that we've got to get right is club selection. Now, there's not a right or a wrong club to play a chip shot with. There's obviously a better club to play a chip shot with. If you're trying to play more of a lofted, floated shot and you've got an 8-iron out, it's going to be pretty hard there unless you're Seve Ballesteros. But one of the common faults that I see when we get into a scenario like this where I've got 6 or 7 paces up onto the ground, up onto the green, then there's a little swale and then the green flats out. A lot of amateurs, because we watch loads of golf on TV now from America, all these nice places where there's loads of undulation in the greens are quite quick. The first thing that I see from the amateur is they pull the most lofted wedge. So as they get to the golf ball here, I could actually take my lob wedge, which is 58 degrees for me. I could actually make a pretty solid strike and a good technique, but if I don't just quite get it enough, I'm made to look a fool there now because I've hit it well, but it's not actually covered the slope there. I've got to give it more of a swing if I've got more loft, because again, when we think of that pointer going onto the club, look how high that is going. That is going straight up in the air, isn't it? If there's 90 degrees, 58 there. If I had something like a 7-iron, it would have a bit more run on it. So don't always go straight to your most lofted wedge. What I would say, if you're chipping around the greens, I would go to maybe the middle of your 3 wedges. So if you've got a lob wedge, you've got a sand wedge, and you've got a pitching wedge, maybe start to use your sand wedge more as your chipping club. So that would be round about 54, 56 degrees. The average loft on tour that is used for chipping around a green is 54 degrees. So when we come to any chip shot, think, do I actually need the most loft that I've got in my bag? Do I need to send this ball really high up in the air, or can I get a little bit of height and it would just get over and I can still get a little bit of run? Because the same chip shot played now with my 54 degree wedge here, even if I don't quite get it as well, it just goes a little bit forwards and I get a better result from there. So that is concept number 2. Number 1, let the loft do the job. Number 2, pick the right club. Don't always just go straight for that most lofted club. If it's one that you've got used to and you chip really well with it, great. Stick with it and keep working at it. But if you're using this as a sort of a guide to get your chipping back on track, go for the middle of your 3 wedges and get used to that one. Let's take a look at the third and final thing, which I think is the most important thing and probably the biggest fault I see in amateurs when they're chipping. Let's take a look at it now. Tip number 3, I don't normally walk around with one of these on, but it's going to help us actually explain a big fault that I see in a lot of people's technique. Because if we just wander around here, one of the most common sort of chipping strokes or swings that I would see is the long one to short one. So my hands get well out behind my trail side of my body here in the backswing, but then on the way through they stop and I get a big flick here. So it's something like this, my Total Golf trainer that I use in loads of my lessons here. This is going to train me now. If I cup my lead wrist, I see that I hit the ball. If I bow my lead wrist, I get away from the golf ball. So as I'm chipping, and again this feeds into a little bit of this first concept of loft, if I'm trying to get the ball up in the air, I would generally get this flicking motion. Now there are certain shots where I would actually need a little bit more of an under release, but I wouldn't get it happening early before the golf ball, it would happen through the impact zone. But for your standard chip shot, what we've got to try and feel is that as I take my address now, we can see here that the ball is just away from my lead back of my hand there. As I make my stroke, I want to try and turn my body still so I'm finished facing my target, but notice as well I've still got a little bit of room here between the ball and the back of my hand as I'm going through. So I'm not trying to add more loft and hit the ball against my hand. I'm trying to deliver the same loft, turn my body and keep the ball away from my hand. If I've got the concept of I don't need to help it up, if I've got the right loft in my hand, and then I add this little feeling of keeping a little bit more structured, almost feeling a bit more wooden in my lead arm, so it's one piece here from lead arm to shaft as I go through, I should start to hit more and more consistent chips as I go through. As we see that, beautiful little clip off, and it's the closest one I've hit in the video because I've used all of those 3 tips. So to summarize guys, concept number 1, don't try and help the golf ball up. You've chosen loft for a reason. Number 2, make sure you're not always just going straight for that most lofted golf club. Maybe use the middle of your 3 wedges. Then number 3, as we're going through it, try and keep the lead arm structure, especially in the lead wrist, a little bit more wooden to see that we get a decent strike. And like I say, we should see that we're chipping better each time as we go through. And that is how we are going to hit good chips. Guys, I hope you've liked this video. If you have, hit that subscribe button for me down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in your next golf lesson.